All right. Okay, so what are characters? Well, when we say characters, we probably just think that those are people in the story. But when we use the word character, we're not actually talking about just the people. We're really talking about, here it is, character, personality, the development of their personality in the story. So, how much does the author develop their personality? At first, you might just have a name, but then slowly the author tells you more and more about that character, and the character themselves might actually change. All right, so that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about personality or character development and how they change. We talked about before the protagonist. So in your notes, here's Waldo. Where's Waldo? He's right there. And the protagonist, simply put, he's the main character. What makes him the main character, though, is he is the character that must experience the conflict and try to resolve it in the course of the story. Now, the main character will have an antagonist. Sometimes that antagonist is a person, like a bad guy, a villain. Now, is he always the villain, though? No, he's not always even a person. Sometimes the antagonist might be, like in the butterfly story, might be nature itself. When we refer to an antagonist, we're referring to the forces arrayed against the protagonist. The forces arrayed against the protagonist. Now, what kind of forces are they? Simply, it could be a person. That's the simplest type of story where you just have one person and they're fighting with another person, either physically, or fighting in words, or just emotionally, they're angry at each other. So that person could be an antagonist, but it could also be the environment. All right, now it could also be the protagonist himself or herself. Yes. So, in other words, if the person is struggling with what they did, they feel guilty about it, like fighting with another side of your personality, the good side fighting with the bad side of your personality. Do you know this story? I hope you do. So that's David and Goliath. Can you identify the protagonist and the antagonist? David is the protagonist. Goliath is the antagonist. And let's see if we can do that for another story. Is there an antagonist in this story? So that's Jesus, and he's calming the storm. He just talks right to the storm and says, "Be quiet." And the storm immediately ceases. Is there actually an antagonist? I mean, is are the disciples the antagonist, or is it Jesus versus the disciples? Or this story is a really good example of person versus a nature or environment. So Jesus is the protagonist, and then the antagonist is nature, the storm. What about this story? You know, Jesus prays in the garden. Okay, this is right before Jesus' crucifixion, and he was praying like all night long. He didn't even go to sleep that night. The disciples fell asleep. They're off in the corner and you can see them, but I don't know if the disciples are what. But Jesus doesn't. He prays, and he is so anxious inside. The Bible describes that he was sweating drops of blood. Is there an antagonist in the story? I mean, there's nobody else there, right? This is a person versus himself conflict. Fascinating, actually, to think of it that way. Okay, so just wanted to clarify those things. And what does an antagonist actually mean? All right. Okay, so now focusing in on here is character development. Um, uh, we need to have four terms here that are very important. So a round character is a character that is well described. So a well described personality is a round character. When the author describes that personality so well that you could believe that they are a real person, is this a true story? Kind of, you ask yourself that, then you're talking about a round character. A flat character. A flat character is not well described. We don't see any struggle in them. They're either good or bad, or they're just like one thing. You know, they're They're a fast runner. That's all we know about them. We don't know anything else, like a sports star or something like that. We just hear about them. So if they're not well described, we only know like one thing about them, then we call that character a flat character. They only have that one personality trait. All right, so these two are considered sort of like opposites. Now, there's another way to look at it, and it's to look at it over time. A static character will not change over time. You're not changing at all, which some characters in stories don't change. They just stay the same. Their personality, not their hair color or anything, but just their personality. We call them a static. Like static electricity means it's not moving, it's staying. So that is personality does not change. Personality doesn't change, or their viewpoint on life. So the dynamic character is their personality or their emotions or their point of view. That means their opinion about life changes over the course of the story. So if they go up and down emotionally, we could call them dynamic. If they liked bananas and then they sort of like really change their mind, it's kind of disgusting. That's a little bit of dynamic, but most importantly is their point of view or their in this case it means like their opinion about something has changed. They see the world in a different way. That makes them a dynamic character. There is another word we can add to these, and that's a stock character. That's a stereotypical character, and you might find this character in many stories. They're usually flat and they're usually static. They don't change. They're just that way for the whole story. So like the typical bad guy in like a shoot 'em up picture or something, an action flick. But there's all sorts of stock characters. There's plenty of stock heroes in which like most of the superheroes in our superhero movies, they're pretty much stock characters. Okay, let's move on from that. We there's the author. We can learn about this character in many different ways. We can learn about who they are from what they say or think in the story, or what they do. If they're like killing people all the time, they might be a bad guy, right? Or if they're giving people flowers and being really nice, then we might think, okay, that's a good person. So what they do can give us a hint as well, or what others say about them. Other characters might say, oh, he's a really nice guy. And then we might believe them that the character is a very good person. Or the author could tell us. The author could tell us directly that the character is a good person or a bad person, or the character is good at something or not very good at something else. All right. So these things, one of them, when the author actually tells us, is called direct presentation. Character is described by the author. The author has told us that the character is a good person, or the author has told us that the character is a bad guy. And then that's called direct presentation. Most of the stories that we read, they won't do that. No, because they want you to experience the process. They don't want you to memorize, oh, character, he's a bad guy. No, they want you to go through an experience. So instead, they use indirect presentation. The character is implied by words and actions, stuff they do, stuff they say, stuff that other people say about them.